You know, when leaders of modern India, people like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, were trying to figure out what their new nation was all about, they looked back to this really powerful idea, this ancient, unbroken heritage that goes back thousands of years. But what was that heritage really like? Let's dig in.
And this quote from Nehru, it just nails it. This is the core idea, a vision of India as one single continuous story, a civilization that's been around for 5,000 years. It's such a powerful story, right? It makes even 180 years of British rule seem like just a short, unhappy blip in a much, much longer saga.
And when you see an image like this, you really get that feeling, don't you? The sense that the past is still right here, living and breathing. But while that feeling is powerful, what we're going to do here is ask a pretty important question about that 5,000-year history. So, was it really this unchanging story? Or was the reality actually a lot more dynamic, a lot more complicated? That's what we're here to find out by looking at what the evidence actually tells us.
Okay, so let's start our investigation right at the beginning. And what's wild is that right out of the gate, we hit a massive mystery that just flips the whole simple story on its head.
First up, the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. I mean, this was a seriously sophisticated urban culture. We're talking about perfectly planned streets and drainage systems that honestly could put some of our modern cities to shame. They even had a written language that we still can't read, by the way, and they were trading with Mesopotamia.
But here's the absolutely incredible part. Until it was discovered back in 1922, nobody even knew this civilization existed. Finding it suddenly added another millennium and a half, 1,500 years, to India's known history. So much for a simple, unbroken story, right? This wasn't continuity. It was a huge break in the chain, a whole beginning that was just lost.
So after the Indus Valley people mysteriously disappear from the scene, a totally new chapter starts around 1500 BC. This is when Indo-Aryan linguistic groups arrive, and their foundational texts, like the Rig Veda, really set the stage for the social and religious world that would come next.
All right, so this next era, this is where we see a really complex social order start to form. But here's the thing you have to understand. It was anything but static. People were constantly arguing about it, challenging it, and rethinking it from the inside. It was alive with debate.
Okay, and this is super important to understand, the difference between the theory and the reality. The ancient texts talk about Varna, this idealized four-part social structure. But what people actually lived was a system of jati, literally thousands of different subcastes, all based on who you were born to and what job you did. It was way, way more complicated than that simple model would have you believe.
So you might be asking, how did they justify this rigid social system? Well, it was through these really big philosophical ideas like karma that came out of texts called the Upanishads. Basically, the idea was that your position in society right now was a direct consequence of what you did in a past life.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. Did everybody just accept this? And the answer is a huge, emphatic no. Ancient India was buzzing with intellectual and social debate, which gave birth to these incredibly powerful movements that questioned the very heart of this system.
And maybe the biggest challenge of all was Buddhism. When it came on the scene in the 6th century BC, it offered a completely different way of looking at the world. It questioned the power of the Brahmins, said no thanks to their complicated rituals, and laid out a path to end suffering that was open to absolutely anyone, no matter what caste you were born into.
We've seen how society was in flux, so now let's zoom out and look at the politics. How was all this organized? Well, what you find isn't one long, unbroken rule. Not at all. It's these huge cycles of empires rising up and then breaking apart again.
Just take a look at this timeline. It really gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. The first thing you'll probably notice are the massive gaps. We're talking hundreds of years between these big empires. And those times when things were fragmented, they are just as important to the story as the times of unity.
And get this, even when there were huge empires, they were totally different from each other. You've got the Maurya Empire under Ashoka, which was pretty centralized, very top-down, and it used this moral code, his Dhamma, to prove it had the right to rule. Then, centuries later, you get the Gupta Empire, which was a much looser setup. It ruled more through influence than direct orders and brought back Brahmanical rituals to justify its power. Same land, two great empires, but two completely different ways of doing things.
And you think this was a static time? No way. The Gupta era was this incredible period of innovation. I mean, this classical age gave us the breathtaking poetry of Kalidasa and the mind-blowing science of the mathematician Aryabhata.
This guy was calculating the value of pi and the length of a solar year with insane accuracy. This was a civilization that was innovating, creating, and moving forward.
So, let's pull all of these different threads together. We've seen lost cities, new arrivals, social arguments, cycles of empire. What does all of this tell us about India's actual ancient heritage?
Well, the first thing is that this whole idea of a changeless India, it's just not true. It's a myth. The real story is one of constant movement and change. It's about absorbing new peoples and cultures, from the Indo-Aryans to the Huns. It's defined by those dynamic political cycles. It's marked by huge internal debates like the one started by Buddhism, and it was deeply connected to the rest of the world through thriving trade.
And that brings us to the real takeaway, the crucial point. The real genius of this 5,000-year story wasn't that it never changed. It was its incredible, unparalleled capacity for change. It was this amazing ability to absorb, to accommodate, to assimilate this immense diversity of people and ideas. That is the real lasting tradition.
And that leaves us with one last really powerful question to think about. If this long, complex history teaches us anything, it's that India's greatest strength, its most profound tradition, is its ability to adapt and transform. So, what does that mean for its future? What comes next?